صباح الخير. أولا رح نكفي الجزء الثاني من البروفيسور بمحاضرته معنا كتلاميذ بالعلوم السياسية بإحدى أهم جامعات بالقرى الأرضية، مش بس بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، واختصاصها العلوم السياسية. تاني شغلة، بتمنى على كل السياديين، كل الوطنيين الشرفاء بالهلال الخصيب، إن كنت تسمعوا الدكتور فارس سعاد على التلفزيون بالمقابلة مع بيروت اليوم بالام تي في، ورح حطها على الفيسبوك يلي كلكن سوا. الفيسبوك بس تفتحوه ببين لأني أنا حوطه عام. بالحقيقة تحية إلى فارس لبنان، فارس الأمة، فارس الإنسان، فارس الإنسانية، فارس القيم، فارس الأخلاق، فارس لبنان. يا أخوان، هالرجالات صاروا قليل بأوطاننا، بدنا نوقف. هلا عم نحط الزينة، تعرفوا منغير كل فترة الزينة. مش أنا طبعا، ربة البيت هي اللي بتحطي. هيدي الوطنية اللي بتشوفوها عند الأمريكان ما بتشوفوها بمحل، وخصوصا الأيرش، وخصوصا الأيرش الكاثوليك. إذن رح كنت تشوفوا الزينة تبع الميموريال داي و4 جولاي، وبتمنى رح حطها على الفيسبوك وتشوفوها كيفية. بتمنى انكم تسمعوا الدكتور فارس سعيد مثل ما قلت لكم، واسمعوا البروفيسور الحلقة الثانية شو حكي بالسياسة. وبتمنى عليكم انكم انتم مثقفين وانكم تتثقفوا زيادة. اللي بقدر عليه بدي اعملكن اياه. بعد عندي 3 تسجيلات سجلت لكن هن عن فنزويلا 2 مشان تسمعوا شو القصة من هالكبار المفكرين بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. وإن شاء الله يكون بعده طيب أخي وصديقي وحبيبي ضافي الجمعاني شو عم بيحكي. بتمنى عليكم، بتمنى أنه يكون بعده بصحة جيدة. وإذا غاب عن هالدنيا، هيدي هي الدنيا، ما رح نبكي وما رح نزعل، ولكن بنزعل على الوطنيين اللي بيموتوا بكير، لأنه الأوطان بتحتاج لإلهم. تفضلوا إذا بتريدوا واسمعوا شو بيقول هذا البروفيسور الكبير بالعلوم السياسية.
In slander. In other words, he is the perfect politician of irresponsibility because he's the perfect politician of eternity. What he's very good at doing, and he is very good at doing it, is telling Americans, especially white Americans, that there was a time when we were all innocent and that it's everyone else's fault, and therefore we should make America great again. What he's very good at doing is creating a fantasy of us and them, divided by an invisible wall, which he will never actually build and has no intention of building, because it's the idea of the wall that matters, the idea of the innocent us
رح
and the
عيد
idea
عيد
of the
نتفة
guilty
صغيرة
them.
مشان
What
تسمعوا
he is
شو يقول
very good at
لكم.
doing,
الصوت ما كان كتير قوي.
reconstruct the rest of the world so that this is all true. To, for example, help the British vote for leaving the European Union, or to help the Americans vote for Donald Trump, or to help AfD in Germany, or to help the Front National in France, because all of these things actually do make the West look ridiculous. And it does make it harder for us to say there are facts and laws and institutions.
نعم، مثل ميشيل عون وسليمان فرنجي وبشور الرعي، السافل ميشيل عون وعائلته، وهالمجرم الكبير اللي ما في أخلاق ولا قيم ولا إنسانية ولا قوري نهج البلاغة، حسن نصر الله اللي مؤيد هالنظام الإرهابي بسوريا. طبعا عم يعمل الدول الهلال الخصيب، طبعا خارج دولة إسرائيل العظمى. ريديكول، صحيح الحكي. كفوا واسمعوا إذا بتريدوا.
And they ought to be taken seriously. So the technique of how Russia gets into the American political system is very interesting, and I write about it at length in the book. But the basic thing to understand is that it is a Russian politics of eternity, a Russian futurelessness the kind of gravitational power of that black hole that breaks our politics of inevitability, that leads us to a situation where Donald Trump can be president. Mr. Trump is precisely a product of an American version of capitalism which says no rules or good rules. He is precisely the sort of person who is in a position to benefit from propaganda.
هلا ببلش الحلقة الثانية. هول سمعتوهم بالحلقة السابقة بس رديت لكن هني هلا بتسمعوا الحلقة الثانية إذا بتريدوا.
Side, which is nothing but lies and slander. In other words, he is the perfect politician of irresponsibility because he's the perfect politician of eternity. What he's very good at doing, and he is very good at doing it, is telling Americans, especially white Americans, that there was a time when we were all innocent and that it's everyone else's fault, and therefore we should make America great again. What he's very good at doing is creating a fantasy.
نعم، بالنظام الإرهابي علم السفالي والحسالي من السياسيين اللبنانيين اللي كانوا وزراء مفروضين بالقوة بعهد الياس الهراوي وإميل لحود، بالأيام اللي كانوا فيها الياس الهراوي وإميل لحود. علمن كيف بيسرقوا لبنان، سرقوا لبنان وسرقوا المال لبنان، وإجا هذا المجرم حسن نصر الله غطى وجاب أسفل سفالة الناس ميشيل عون وسرقوا هالمال العام هذا كله. هلا قايمين عن يحكوا بالشرف وبالأخلاق وميك ليبانون جريت اجين. اسمعوا الله يخليك نسمعوا.
Us and them, divided by an invisible wall, which he will never actually build and has no intention of building, because it's the idea of the wall that matters, the idea of the innocent us and the idea of the guilty them. What he is very good at doing is using technology to create the sense of an eternal present, where everyone is either so exhilarated or so angry that we forget completely about the future and live entirely in the present. That's the politics of eternity, and that's where we are. Now, normally, at this point in a lecture like this, where one talks about Mr. Trump, one would go on to say that, but in Europe, everything is different and better. That is not the pivot that I'm about to make. It is very easy to look at someone else's politics of inevitability and say, that is not true. That's a delusion. How can those stupid Americans believe those things? What's harder, and what I'm going to ask you to do now, is to look at your own politics of inevitability and ask how it makes you vulnerable to the politics of eternity. Because you have one, and it does. So the European politics of inevitability has a couple parts. The first, strikingly like the American one, is materialist. The idea that if you get the economics of European integration correct, then the politics will follow and the culture will follow, right? Not really true. But the more disturbing part of your politics of inevitability, and the deeper part, and the truly dangerous part, is your idea of who is doing the learning. So your notion is that economics leads people to learn about politics and to learn about culture. But the people in question in this story that you're all educated in, which is 100% wrong, is that it is the nation or the nation state that does the learning. You have a story about how there was a First World War and that was pretty bad, and the Second World War was even worse, and therefore the clever European nation states learned that they should trade coal and steel and then other things and so on and so forth, and that's why you're wiser than the Americans. This is completely and utterly and dangerously wrong, and it is your politics of inevitability. Your idea that there was a European nation state in history and that it learned from war that war was bad and hence integration is a dangerous and misleading idea, and it is about to destroy the European Union. Let me first say why it's wrong, and then I'll say why it's dangerous. It's wrong because the history of Europe is not a history of the nation state. The history of Europe is a history of empire. Whether we're talking about Germany in the Second World War, whether we're talking about the Netherlands, France, Portugal, Spain, Great Britain, perhaps above all, the history of Europe is not a history of the nation state. These places were not nation states, or if they were, only for a brief period of a few years. These places were empires. So what matters in the 20th century is not a nation state learning, never happens. What matters in the 20th century is that when European empires break down, they have a place to go. The European Union was not a choice made by nation states who were growing wise from experience. The European Union was an existential necessity for imperial fragments that were losing colonial wars around the world. And by the way, one of the reasons why the whole story of learned from war, economic integration, then politics is so nice is that it allows you precisely not to take responsibility for Algeria and Indochina and all those other wars that somehow you kept fighting after you learned that war was bad, right? The story of European integration, I told you this wasn't going to be as much fun as the American part. The story of European integration is precisely the story that allows you to be irresponsible about your actual history and generates this nice story of virtue about how you learned from war, but the Americans didn't. Not true. The only difference between Europeans and Americans when it comes to war is that Europeans notice when they lose them. That's the only difference, right? If we have a problem, it's that we keep losing wars and don't notice. But you didn't stop fight. See, it's so easy, right, to laugh at the Americans. But you kept fighting wars after the Second World War. You kept doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it until you lost. And the German history, which Germans are very happy to overlook, is that the Second World War was not about a Holocaust in which Germans killed German Jews. Most German Jews survived. German Jews are only about 3% of the total victims. The Holocaust takes place during a colonial war, the object of which was basically to recreate Africa in Eastern Europe. If not for that colonial aspiration, there would be no Holocaust. And that colonial aspiration is what also leads to the mass murder of 3 million Soviet prisoners of war, roughly 1 million non-Jewish Poles, and all kinds of other victim groups that are generally not mentioned or overlooked. The Second World War in Germany is domesticated and reduced and minimized so that the colonial aspect of it can be forgotten. That is how you have a politics of inevitability. Now, why? So that's why it's all wrong. Why does that matter? Here's how it matters. It matters because the debate about the European Union is taking place not in the future where it should be. The debate about the European Union is taking place in a past that never happened. The debate about the European Union is a series of national debates in which national political elites argue about should there be integration or should we go back to the nation state. But you can't go back to the nation state because you never had the nation state. The discussion about Brexit is therefore almost entirely mythical. The Conservative Party in Britain is not proposing going back to something. It's actually proposing taking a leap into something entirely new, because there has never been a British nation state. And I think it's very unlikely that there will ever be a British nation state. I don't think that Brexit will happen, but if it does, it won't be Brexit because Britain will not survive it. There's no reason to think that Britain will survive it. Okay, so this is how your politics of inevitability makes you vulnerable. And this thing which I've slowed down and tried to explain is, by the way, totally obvious to your neighbors. So whether it's a Ukraine that looks at the European Union and wants to get in because it understands that the historical purpose of the European Union is to take corrupt, flawed states and make them better, or whether it's a Russian Federation that looks at the European Union and attacks Ukraine and then attacks the European Union, From the outside, it is totally clear that the alternatives are integration and empire. Those are the real alternatives, integration and empire. The triumph of the politics of eternity in Europe is to recast the debate so that your actual history and therefore your actual possibilities are not discussed. What are discussed are entirely fictional things which never happened in the past and therefore are unlikely also to happen in the future. And predictably, your enemies, Russian, but also increasingly American, people like Mr. Trump or Mr. Bannon or Mr. Bolton, will tell you, yes.
لايك اللبنانيين نعم لايك مستر مثل ما قالت حسن نصر الله هذا المجرم اللي بدون ضمير وبدون إنسانية وبدون نهج البلاغة وهالسافل الوسخ ميشيل عون وبعدين شاهين سليمان فرنجية وبدترك الراعي وهول هن مثل ما عم بيحكي هو عن هالشخصيات الأمريكية هال المساهمين بقتل الشعب السوري وذبح الأبرياء بالشعب السوري. هذا الهولوكوست على سوريا اللي صار هن مسؤولين عنه 100% وعلى سرقة المال العام تبع الشعب اللبناني واضحة مثل الشمس.
Go back to the nation state. That will be wonderful for you. And why do people like Mr. Putin or Mr. Bannon tell you that? Because they know it is completely bogus and a trap.
Correct.
And I think it's probably important for Europeans to realize that in time. So this is how your politics of inevitability makes you vulnerable to a politics of eternity. And this is where we are as we head into the European elections of May of 2019. You might have noticed that exactly the same group of people who made Trump happen in America in 2016 are now working in Europe in 2019. You might also have noticed that the exact same group of Russian bots, I mean literally the same Russian bots, who were at work on our presidential election are now at work in Europe in 2019. So these are examples of how inevitability becomes eternity, and I hope that I've done something to bring them home. What then would a politics of responsibility look like? To make the most important point at the beginning, a politics of responsibility would have to be about the future. Europe is going to exist in the future, or it's not going to exist at all. If Europe continues to discuss its reality in terms of non-existent pasts, it can't last for very long. But the other side of that.
صحيح هذا الكلام. انتو الشعوب القاعدين بالهلال الخصيب اللي بتحبوا وطنكم. انتو مصيركم بإيدكم. إذا ما عرفتم فتحتوا على دولة إسرائيل وارتبطتوا بدولة إسرائيل عسكريا وسياسيا واجتماعيا واقتصاديا انتو لن تكونوا exist. Et si tu n'existes pas انتو بكن تكونوا موجودين والأمل فيكم. مثل ما بدي ضل رددها بدكن تضحوا تفيكن تاخدوا الحرية تبعكم. كفوا واسمعوا إذا بتريدوا.
Is that Europe is the one entity in the world which is actually politically and institutionally equipped to deal with the real problems of the 21st century. There is unfortunately, as far as I can tell, no propaganda outfit in the European Union that's capable of making that point, but it's nevertheless true. Only the European Union is actually capable of dealing with the major challenges of the 21st century. Okay, what would a politics of responsibility look like? First, responsibility itself.
بروفيسور صحيح الحكي إلى الشعوب برجع بكرر السياسيين اللي وجدهن الأنظمة الإرهابية تبع إيران سوريا حزب الله بدول الهلال الخصيب هن غير مسؤولين غير كفؤين لقيادة أوطان. واضحة مثل الشمس ما بدها هن يسرقوا ونهبة وعم بيجربوا يغطوا تما يفوتوا على الحبوسات. بدكن تفوتوا على الحبوسات. برجع بكرر لكم بدكن تفوتوا على الحبوسات. اسمعوا.
The virtue of responsibility has to be affirmed as a virtue. The thing about inevitability is that it says the good thing's going to happen anyway. Eternity says the bad thing's going to happen anyway. A politics of responsibility does away with the anyway. The politics of responsibility has to begin from the notion that politics must have at least one virtue in it, that we can't talk about politics without virtue. Second, history. The politics of eternity and the politics of inevitability both pretend to be history. In fact, they're parodies of history and they're destroying history. In order to have responsibility, though, we have to have history. Because responsibility involves seeing the possibilities and limitations that flow from the past, making a decision in the future, in the present, understanding that there are a limited set of possibilities in the future. And by the way, the same thing goes for democracy. Democracy requires historical time. If you don't have past, present, and future, you also can't have democracy, because
Correct.
voting requires exactly those three same kinds of time.
Correct.
Third, a politics of responsibility would require the active production of factuality. The politics of inevitability says, whatever the facts are, I'm going to merge them into my story of how things are turning out great. Again, 85% of the American book market. The politics of eternity says, facts don't matter, you have your facts, I have my facts. All that really matters is spectacle. In order for there to be a politics of responsibility, we have to insist on factuality as something that has to be produced. There's a long tradition in Anglo-Saxon political thought which says that so long as there's open debate, the truth will emerge. Like many things in Anglo-Saxon political thought, that is completely wrong. In order for there to be truth to emerge, there has to be someone who is actually producing the facts. In other words, there have to be engaged policies to support local media and especially investigative reporting. If nobody does the work of investigative reporting, then there are no facts in the space and the truth cannot possibly emerge. The fourth thing I think would have to
نعم yes Mr. Professor. ميشيل عون وهالسفالة والحسالة والموجودة بضغط من حسن نصر الله إنه بكن تروحوا لعند بشار الأسد. هني غير مسؤولين. وبينغمها بشور الراعي يقبرني هلا بده يستلم جنازة هذا البطريرك الوطني الكبير، بطريرك الشرق وسائر المشرق. صحيح تنطبق عليه البطريرك الصغير. الله بده يبيع بضاعه تيغطي حاله على عمالته بشور الراعي للأنظمة الإرهابية، مثل ما بلش بالأقليات. هلا بده يكمش لحقيقة البطريرك الوطني الكبير، البطريرك الصغير، ويبلش يبيع بضاعة حكي. اسمعوا كفوا، أنا بدي أسمعكم اللي تعتلوا هون.
An affirmation of humanity, by which I don't mean humanity in the sense of being humane. I mean humanity in the sense of being human. One of the problems that we face is that we're ceding so much ground to the machines in our public life that we're not aware that they don't have a sense of responsibility, right? So much of what goes wrong in politics these days has to do with the fact that algorithms, which don't care about us one way or the other, are pretty good at figuring out what makes us angry and what makes us anxious and what makes us afraid. That is changing the face of politics. And the only way to deal with that is to address it directly and say that there have to be digital human rights. We have to begin a human rights discussion, again, in a world where the main problem is not physical abuse, but psychological abuse. And a short note about Germany. It's a terrible idea to digitalize the classroom. It's a terrible idea. You should stop now. It's a terrible idea. You should stop now.
نعم سقفنا نحن كلنا تلاميذ إنه أنتو لازم هلا تقولوا اللي لازم تقولوه. هني غير وطنيين ما بيعني لألن شيء. ليه لبنان وليه بكركة وليه الموارنة ولا باقي الشعب اللبناني؟ ليش عم بروح عند الموارنة وحدهم؟ ما بيعني لألن شيء. جيبتهم وغريزتهم يصلوا المال العام، موتوسيكليتات قدام، وبيشخ بالفرشي قدام مرته بالليل بس بده يفرجيها انه هو كبير. بأمركم اسمعوا معلش.
United States, all the school districts who brought computers in, all the early movers moving computers in, or the early movers moving computers out. All the people who create this technology in Silicon Valley, all of them send their kids to schools where there are no computers. Steve Jobs put computers in schools and then said, I did that to make money. It's a bad idea to have computers in schools. You should not put computers in German schools until you have a generation of teachers of computer programming who know more about the computers than the children do. And you do not have that. Digitalizing the classroom in these conditions is a terrible, terrible mistake. You will lose a generation of school children. You will also lose a generation of teachers. 10 years from now, you will pull the computers out and you'll have to start all over again. So what you should instead do is take the $5.5 billion, euros, give every school teacher in Germany a raise, and allow the child who has the best grades in every class to destroy the computer with a hammer. Because that would be ein unvergessbares Erlebnis für diese Schülerin oder für diesen Schüler. Und würde auch nicht nur seine Klasse und nicht nur seinen Lehrern, aber auch eine ganze Generation retten. Okay, so, next point. Politics of responsibility has to involve sovereignty. The problem of oligarchy, the main problem of oligarchy, is that very wealthy people and very wealthy corporations, like, for example, Amazon, Google, are too good at not paying taxes inside places like the European Union. And finally, a politics of responsibility has to involve new sources of energy. Hydrocarbons are at the root, in many ways, of the politics of eternity. The people who give us the hydrocarbons are the same people who not just deny climate change, but they're also the same people who keep us from thinking about the future at all. In order to begin thinking about the future again, we have to have new sources of energy, not just to head off the worst, but to make the best possible. So again, in Germany, I would just suggest it's not good enough to keep saying in this kind of nice Protestant way, okay, no more nuclear energy, no more coal, I'm going to be very good. You have to act, I mean, while you're at it, why don't you just say no more Russian gas? I'd like to see that. But while you're at it, you have to say, what are we going to create, right? Why aren't the Germans the ones who are solving fusion? I don't understand that. Why aren't the Germans the ones who are solving fusion? Because if you solve fusion, instead of the Chinese who are going to fix it, who are going to solve it if it's not you, then you would be bringing into the world a new source of energy which would change politics completely. Okay, so to close, thank you for your patience. The politics of responsibility has to have two sides. On the one side, we all have to be more responsible. We have to see responsibility as a virtue. On the other side, we have to create institutions that make it possible for individuals to be responsible. We can't say it's all down to the individuals. There has to be a dialectic. There has to be a dance of time moving forward between the individual who sees the virtues of responsibility and practices them and the institutions that continue to make that possible. That's what it would be like for history to be moving forward again. That's what it would be like for this log jam of the politics of eternity to be broken. And that's what I mean by a politics of responsibility. Thank you very much.
إذا بتريدوا خلوني كفي بس كلمتين تقلكن هي بطلب كل واحد بيسمع عن هالديمقراطية هيدي شو قالنا البروفيسور بهالمحاضرة. بطلب منكم يمكن اليوم كل واحد بيسمع هالفيديو يقول هابي ماذر داي لميشيل أوباما، واللي بيتذكر أمه يقول هابي ماذر داي فور ميشيل أوباما. أهلا وسهلا فيكم بخاطركم.